Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So in this tutorial, we are looking at named arguments. This is a new feature in PHP 8, and I really think you should be using it because it's convenient. So let's see what the problem is and how this new feature actually solves that problem. So let's say you have a function that you use to query in your database, something like this. Okay, so this function can call, will have a few arguments. So the first one can be the query string itself. The next one can be the data you're supplying. Okay, and then you can have some optional arguments, like for example, what's the limit? How many records do you want at a time? So let's say we set that to 10. And then you can have an offset as well, because offset moves you to the next page. So for pagination there. And then you can have the order, which is either descending or ascending. Okay, something like this. So nothing wrong with this function right now, but a problem comes in when you want to call this function and you want to omit these optional values and just go straight to this one. Okay, so for a second here, I just want to echo out. Just a minute here. Let's echo all of these guys. And then at the end, I'll put the break tag. And then of course, I want to echo some pre-tags because usually that looks better. All right, so here's our function, SQL. Let's do data, let's do limit, and let's do offset, and let's do order. Now some of these are ints, so like these ones, we will not know what we are dealing with. So let me just do this and concatenate. So, all right, something like this. So just to show us what's going on inside internally. So if I want to call this function, I may do something like this. I'll say SQL is equal to select all from users, something like that. And then some data. All right. Now in this case, just to make things simple, I'm just going to say this is some data as a string. Okay, something like that. And then I will call the function. I'm just going to say query and then supply that string and data. Now, because these others have default values, it's going to render them still. So let's run this in our browser and see what's going on. So if I run this, this is what I get. See, select all from users, correct. This is some data. And then limit is 10 and offset is 0. And then I've got my order there. Okay, so that's good. So now the problem is, what if I want to specify the order? Now, some functions will have, like for example, let's say image resize resampled. Look at all those arguments on this function. There are quite many. Now you can imagine if some of these were optional up to a certain point, and I just wanted to change the very last. I want to keep these default values here, but just to run to the last one here. So you can imagine this as we are doing this here. This is a small number, but imagine it's big. So to change order, I would have to supply these whether I like it or not. Because if, for example, I just say order here, right? And let me put order. And then I say ascending, right? I want to change the order here. Right, so I put order and I try to ignore these. It will not know that I'm trying to change order. It will assume this is the limit. Okay, so as you can see here, if I now refresh the page, you see that the limit is what has been changed instead of changing that one, because that's how it works. You have to put everything in the middle to get to the last variable. Now, named arguments changes all that. So what I can do instead is this. Exactly the way things are right now, I can just name this particular one and say order with a full colon and a space, like that. And once I do that, it knows that it should target this one and forget the others. So let's see if that actually worked. So if I now refresh, you'll see that limit has remained as 10, but I have changed this last variable here to ascending from descending. See how convenient that is. It's incredible. And then here, you can even name these ones if you want. You just SQL and then a data over here. All right, something like this. Now, these names are coming from the names, the actual variable names on the function definition here. So you can't go ahead and say SQL2, something like that. This will cause an error because it means you haven't supplied the SQL first variable there, I guess. Maybe to say something like unknown named parameter there. Okay, it doesn't know that one. So let's remove that. So whatever you name these here, that's what you name them when calling the function down here. So let me refresh again. Let's see that. There we go. So that is working as intended. All right, so hopefully you have learned something here and you begin to use named arguments in your projects. All right, guys, I'll see you in another video.